And we're back for another episode of Standpoint. We're here in the beautiful Rumble Studios in Washington, D.C. And I got to say, I'm very excited about today's episode. Everyone who knows me personally or professionally knows that an issue that's near and dear to my heart is fighting anti-Semitism. Broadly speaking, it's actually a civil rights issue, an issue that's been really just taken over by the left up until the last few years. And we'll talk about that today, perverted in the worst sense of the word. And but it's still an important issue for me, not just as a proud American Jew, but as an American and someone who just loves this country and the rights provided in this country. But the rights provided by the Congress and by the White House, et cetera, are only as good as them being enforced and actually being enforced. And seeing the perversion of those laws that have been passed for so many years over the last couple decades is just aggravating for someone that sits in my shoes. But Trump, number two, Trump 47 has come back with a vengeance. We've seen an explosion of anti-Semitism all over the world, especially here in the United States. We've done episodes about it. People have followed. But Trump isn't just talking the talk, he's walking the walk. And one of the main tools that he's put into place, one of the main pieces he's put into place is sitting right next to me, Mr. Leo Terrell, civil rights attorney for his entire career as a young man. So it's a young career, but now for a long career in civil rights, you may know him from all his years doing TV commentating on Fox News and other channels. He's the senior advisor to Pam Bondi in the DOJ. He's the strong voice, the leading voice on anti-Semitism, but he's not just like me, someone just talking, trying to push things. He's actually getting things done. So we're going to jump right into it. Leo Terrell, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Glad to be here. The left has abandoned their commitment to civil rights. When it came to making sure everyone was treated fairly, the Democrats, which I was a member of, used to be front and center, took credit for making sure everyone was treated fairly. They have abandoned that commitment. They have ignored the failure to address anti-Semitism. And as a civil rights attorney for 35 years, a person who knows the history between Jewish American and Black Americans, where Jews helped create the NAACP. They walked the streets in the 60s to make sure that Black Americans had the same rights afforded to all others. And as we sit here today, the Jewish American community has been abandoned by the Democrat Party. And I'll tell you right now, regardless of party affiliation, we have the right president who has made a commitment to end anti-Semitism. We have the right Attorney General to sit in that position of law and adjustment to end anti-Semitism. And I'm proud to work with President Trump and Pam Bondi to work on eliminating anti-Semitism. This is a 24/7 commitment. I am privileged to be in this position, and I want to make sure people understand this is not a Jewish issue. This is an American issue. This is a bipartisan issue. This is something that everyone has to get on board. The fundamental rights to practice your religion and to have freedom in this country is fundamental. Jewish Americans have been denied that. Our goal is to make sure they have it.
Many of us were involved in the campaign one way or another for the president, and in talking to members of the Jewish community in particular, many of us would talk and say, look, when President Trump gets in, he's the one who signed the executive order to make sure it was clear, because it was ambiguous before, whether Jews are protected under Title VI. That is the mechanism that's being used, also Title VII for employees and others. But he's going to get in there and he's going to get to work to protect the Jewish community, to try to defend against this rise of anti-Semitism. And obviously you being in the place you're in is proof of that. But can you give us a little bit more insight? You're out there, you're vocal, but you get selected for this position. What did the president or Pam Bondi tell you as far as what's the charge? Why is this important policy-wise for President Trump?
Thank you very much. Because first of all, the policy focus is everyone in this country has the privileges under the Constitution. You mentioned Title VI, Title VII. I'll get to that in a second, but it's a no-brainer. Look, Jewish Americans have been denied a fundamental right to go to school. The campus harassment that took place at these Ivy League schools and across the country. Title VI is federal funding that is afforded to universities on the premise that they're going to be treating everyone fairly, regardless of race, religion. It wasn't being done in the past administration. Title VII is fundamental, that protects employees. Jewish faculty members, Jewish support staff were being harassed and not getting Title VII protection afforded to everyone else. Hate crimes, what I find insulting that has been corrected. Jewish Americans walking to school, going to synagogues were harassed. They were intimidated. And I want to make sure this is clear. We're not talking about First Amendment speech here. We're talking about conduct and speech, which is illegal. You cannot intimidate, harass, damage individuals' livelihoods. And this is what's changed under the Trump administration. Every tool in the toolbox. Hate crime charges being filed. For example, that horrific murder in D.C. where 2 Israelis were murdered. The situation in Boulder, Colorado, where Americans were just walking, supporting the hostages in Israel. They were firebombed. This is what's not going to be allowed under the Trump administration. And what I'm telling you, civil criminal penalties are being implemented against those who believe that they can get away with it. It's not going to happen under the Trump Bondi administration.
What's incredible to me is, I also work, volunteer as the chair of a medical research nonprofit called the Children's Tumor Foundation. And when some funding from these universities is getting pulled, despite the fact that they have endowments that are worth billions of dollars, everybody's up in arms. How can they pull funding? Because some of it is for important things like medical research. And my answer to them every time, and it's as important to me as anything else in medical research for rare diseases that I'm involved in, but all they have to do is protect the Jewish students. And then I always counter by saying, if it's the 1960s, right, before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was implemented, or maybe right after it, you wouldn't be saying, well, just fund them anyways, even though they're not letting black people in school, or they're letting them in, but they're making them drink from different water fountains, or whatever it is they're doing. And that's the kind of thing that's happening today. People are afraid to make those comparisons, but they're there.
Well, you know what? That's an excellent point. And let me tell you right now, I don't want to mention some high, well-known politicians making that horrific, insulting argument. They talk about, oh, you're going to take away the funding for this valuable research just because you want to eliminate anti-Semitism? Are you kidding me? I say take all the money away. Take all the funding away. If you're going to allow Jewish hatred to exist on a college campus, on a university, you don't deserve a nickel of federal dollars. American taxpayers should not subsidize hatred. And for those who make that argument, we're going to take away important research. I got news for you. There's a lot of colleges and universities that will accept that money and guarantee they will not have anti-Semitic conduct on their campus. Take that money away and redirect it to colleges and universities that have a commitment to making sure that Jewish Americans are treated the same way as white Americans, black Americans, brown Americans. They should be treated exactly the same.
Absolutely. And in Florida, just so you know, a couple of years ago, we passed, I was tangentially involved. The state of Florida passed a law with an anti-Semitism definition, which has become this whole issue.
Yes.
The only implementation was, here's the definition. Now treat anti-Semitism the same way you treat racism. Whatever way you treat racism in your schools, treat anti-Semitism, not more and not less. And the uproar was outrageous, to be honest. But let's drill down just a little bit. I know you can't talk about pending litigation. It's fine. We won't speak about specific cases, but we hear the messaging. It's loud and clear. Hopefully all Americans are hearing the message, not just today, but always. But in the litigation and also just disputes back and forth, withholding funds and then negotiating, the universities are coming to administration to negotiate. How can we be sure, we, the U.S. government, the U.S. taxpayers, how can we be sure that they implement systems that will actually ensure the protection of all students, including the Jewish students, as opposed to just signing any sort of settlement agreement? These schools are rotten to the core with lots of issues there. So what can you do, or what can the government do to ensure as best we can that we actually implement change at these universities?
That is an excellent question. And trust me, that argument has been the center front of discussion in the administration. Look, having these settlement agreements, great. Having them pay a fine, great. Deterrent. It's always going to boil down to the right personnel implementing the policies. Look what we have right now. We have the right president. We have the right attorney general, and you got Leo Terrell, who is a watchdog. I won't compromise. Blacks, whites, brown. And how do we ensure that? It's the commitment by the administration to the cause to make sure it happens. To hold these universities feet to the fire every day. If they make one mistake, you call them on it. And that is where personnel is critical. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Is everyone in the administration committed as Trump, as Bondi, as Terrell? No. But we have a 24/7 commitment. And more importantly, we got to put up guardrails right now because we have the best president to handle this matter. We got the best AG, and we have to make sure there are guardrails in place, the right people, the right rules, because after Trump, my goodness, are we going to have the same enforcement? I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say we are, but I'm telling you right now, we're working on it every day to make sure guardrails are in place, to make sure Jewish Americans are protected like all Americans. They're entitled to it.
Yeah, and sometimes getting in the weeds actually matters. So just dive in a little bit. We're talking about the difference of different administrations. President Trump signed the executive order for Title VI to provide protections for Jewish students. Biden, to his credit, he didn't rescind it. But what he did, and I know this firsthand because I filed a Title VI action against University of California, Berkeley, because they precluded, quote, Zionist speakers from participating or Zionist people to become members of their groups. Just like a ridiculous statement. And their dean, Cherminsky, who actually was the author of my constitutional law book, I think forgot the book he wrote himself. But it's just Zionism. It's a core belief of the vast majority of Jews. I say you can't just pick a core belief and then say, if you have that core belief, you're out, right? So it's clear what it is. But what did the Biden administration do on that Title VI action? You want to take a guess?
Well, you tell me. No,
they sat on it. They put it on a shelf with the rest of them.
Well, you know what? The Biden administration had. I'm gonna talk at 30,000 feet because I'm a government official. But the point here is that the Biden had this so-called plan that was never implemented. They talk about a plan that they had to address anti-Semitism, and all I can simply tell you is this. When the Trump administration took office, we were thoroughly disappointed in the lack of action taken to protect Jewish Americans in every aspect of life. On the streets, you saw the hate crimes that took place on the college campus, the denial of the right to speak on campus, nothing. And this goes to the question that you said, how do you ensure this protection? You can't. You have to make sure, even if you have the greatest laws, the most well-written settlement agreement, if you don't have the right players in place, it's not going to be enforced. And that's why we were in such a horrible situation before Trump got in, before he put his people in place, people who have committed to eliminating anti-Semitism, people who have fire in their belly. And if there's one thing, to give you another example that we haven't talked about, but I want to bring up, again, regarding Jewish safety, is the Jewish tax. The requirement of Jewish Americans to pay this exorbitant fee to walk down the street, to have events, because of the threats against them, because of the lack of protection that does not exist for them. That is going to change because we have to make sure, as the whole purpose of this discussion is to make sure Jewish Americans, it's not a question, should receive these rights. They're entitled under the Constitution, under Title VI, under Title VII, under the hate crime statute. They're entitled to the same rights afforded to all Americans.
So two comments. First of all, just to respond in particular, of what can be done that can maybe be sticky beyond the administration, and hopefully we have a next president will be from the same party, will be Republican. They'll keep the same priority, hopefully, as long as we keep pressuring them. But there are two things I think that can extend beyond any administration. And first is the marketplace. If we can change the way the marketplace, in this case, students and donors, look at their universities and the expectations that they bring towards their universities. If they realize there's a price to be paid, maybe every 4 years, maybe every 8 years, but it's not a price they want to pay. If the marketplace gets brought along, that's something that can be changed. The second, or that can cause change. The second is just like Title VI executive order that Trump put in place. I know it's the third time I've mentioned it, but why is it so important? Because Biden would have loved to rescind that, but it takes a lot of political capital to rescind something that's in place. So long as the administration puts in these things in place, yes, they can be rescinded. Yes, they cannot be enforced to the same level, but it's very hard to take those things back, right? So those are the institutions. Let me ask you a little, I'm trying to move fast to be respectful of everybody's time, but the DOJ's role in a little bit, let's get into the legal stuff, whatever you could speak about or not, just generally from a policy perspective. There's lots of Title VI actions that were filed. There's lots of Title VI actions, lawsuits that were filed, all by the private sector. What's the DOJ's position in general on those? Is the DOJ getting involved, statements of interest, trying to push these cases, or are you just following them? Tell me how the DOJ looks at those efforts.
I want to answer that question, but I want to get back to one thing about the market aspect, the two aspects, if I may. We can force change economically. The other side receives foreign money. We know that, and domestic money. The biggest hurdle that we have, in my opinion, to fighting anti-Semitism, we're losing the PR war. I have never in my lifetime seen this level of anti-Semitism because organizations that you would expect to tell the truth are not telling the truth about what's going on. I don't want to mention their names, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times. They're misleading the American public on the seriousness of anti-Semitism. Thank goodness for the Trump administration. Now, regarding your other question that you were asking about, and I apologize, I took you away from the question that you asked me about.
I asked you about the DOJ's role.
Oh, yeah, let me answer that. Yeah. And I'm going to go back and make sure I don't get in trouble. 30,000 feet. Sure. I can simply tell you this, that the DOJ is looking at all cases, private cases, looking at investigating issues that involve actions that they may take on their own. So they're looking at it without being specific, because I can't. I'm telling you right now, everything is being looked at, every aspect. And it's on a civil level. It's also on a criminal level. We're looking at everything because time is of the essence. And as we speak, the harassment and the anti-Semitism has been neutralized, hasn't been eliminated, and we have to keep this effort up. The Trump administration has 3 years and about 125 days left, and we got to keep working at it at warp speed.
Tell me about the administrative state or deep state, whatever people want to call it, the folks that work in government forever, right? They're not the non-appointees. I'm speaking to lots of different appointed folks in different departments, divisions. And in the Department of Justice, have you had pushback in a significant sense from the lawyers that are there in the DOJ to push these kind of efforts that you're pushing? These are the same people who were there just a couple of years ago last year, just sitting on their hands.
Well, that's a good question. Let me simply say to you that I'm proud to have a career person as my chief of staff. Look, this is not politics. Fair, it shouldn't be, okay? And it's not for me. To me, look, you and I could disagree on tax cuts, foreign policy, but eliminating anti-Semitism is fundamental. We're a country that believes in religious freedom. So let me address the issue of appointees and career people. There are people on both sides who find anti-Semitic behavior repugnant. I'm looking for those people. I've found some of those people. That's again, but a commitment to eliminate anti-Semitism. That's who I'm looking for. So I'm recruiting the right people. Again, we take our marching orders from, in my opinion, the greatest president in my lifetime, the greatest attorney general in my lifetime, and I'm using their leadership, their guidance to pick the right people. And I'm telling you right now, I can use more. I can use more people to help, but I'm moving and I'm working hard and I can work harder.
I usually don't comment, but it's good to hear because I know the task you're taking is monumental. For those of us who follow it closely, it's not just a few cases. It's not just a few instances. It's not just a few even forums to bring these fights. There's a lot of them. So you need a full team behind you. So that's great to hear. But let me ask you the question, Leo Terrell. Why is the fight against anti-Semitism so important for all Americans?
I'm glad you asked that question because America's next. They're going after the Jewish Americans. They're going after Jews, Israelis. We're next. Okay, and then Western civilization after us. Let me be clear, though. I want to make sure all your viewers hear this statement. I'm proud to be a person of color heading this task force. I know the history. I know American history. Besides being a lawyer, I'm a school teacher. And I understand the history of the relationship between Black Americans and Jewish Americans. I know about the 60s. I know that there was 2 Jewish activists who lost their lives in 1964, Werner and Goodman, helping people that look like me to have equal rights. We have a commitment. Everyone in this country has a commitment, regardless of skin color, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation, to make sure Jewish Americans are protected and treated the same. So I take great honor to have this job. I'm proud to have this job, not because of skin color, but because I'm an American and I understand what makes this country unique. That beautiful document we call the Constitution, that beautiful belief that we believe in equal justice for all. That's why I'm glad to be the face of this battle.
And those of us who care about it are glad that you are the face of this battle, not just the face, the voice, because the way you speak on this, it's admirable the way you care about this, and I appreciate it. You're wearing a hat for Hadar Golden. People don't know who Hadar Golden is. They should know. 2012, I was actually in Israel when this happened. 3 young boys were kidnapped. They were hitchhiking in Israel. There's a culture of hitchhiking. They were hitchhiking school children there. I think they were about 15, 16 years old. The 3 of them were kidnapped. The IDF went on a nationwide manhunt, found them unfortunately buried in a shallow grave. It launched a war with Gaza. We're seeing now a much bigger war, but that was a big one at the time. When the war ended, right at the end of one of the last battles, Hadar Golden and Oren Shaul were killed. It looks like they were killed. All evidence is they were killed, but their bodies were dragged. There was actually IDF soldiers chasing them in the tunnels to try to bring back their bodies because it's so important. Life is so sacrosanct in the Jewish religion and Christianity as well. Not so for Hamas in Gaza and for the Islamists. So they took the bodies. Israel wanted to end the war, and everyone thought once Israel pulls out of Gaza, which they did that day, they would surely give back. They're just bodies of soldiers who were killed. This many years later, they haven't. And it's what I always call it the golden problem. When now, with the war now, people say, well, if Israel pulls out, they'll give back the hostages. They won't. So tell me how you got to be wearing a Hadar Golden hat. How'd you connect to the family?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. I had the privilege to meet Hadar Golden's mother in my DOJ office. I had the privilege to meet her 2 sons. One of her sons is the twin brother of Hadar Golden. And I wanted to make sure Hadar Golden, who's been in captivity since 2014, to make sure he is never forgotten. And this hat is a symbol of my commitment to make sure Hadar is not forgotten. So whenever I do any speaking engagement, any podcast, I'm wearing this hat because I want people to understand the commitment the Trump administration, the Pam Bondi Attorney General's office, and I have toward bringing all 48 hostages home. One of those 48 is Hadar Golden. So this is my message. We will never forget, and we will always fight to make sure Hadar and all the hostages come home.
Leo Terrell, thank you for showing our viewers and listeners why I was so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for taking on this mission, taking it on with so much passion, but also substance. Any way I can ever be helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, very much. And I appreciate the time. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you, everyone. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and do all the great things you do to support podcasts, and we'll see you next time.